So I'm sure you've seen lots of videos on all sorts of builds for God of War Ragnarok. Some are super strong endgame builds, others claim to be for the early game but then show you items that you clearly can't get until later on. Well, in this video, we're going to put together what I think is the true early game build. We'll cover armor, weapon grips, shields and attachments, relics, and runic attacks for the axe and blades. I settled on this build while playing on the Give Me No Mercy difficulty, so I'm confident it's a solid recommendation for the vast majority of players. Even if you're playing on Give Me God of War, I still think this is the best starting build. All the gear we cover can be obtained before leaving Svartalfheim, which is only the second main quest, so that's very early. We've got a bunch of items to cover, so let's dive in. Let's start with the wrist and waist armors, because those are going to stay the same for the entire lifespan of this build. Of course, you'll start the game with the wraps and belt of survival, but you'll want to move on from those pretty fast. Their stats aren't great, but more importantly, they don't have any special bonus. As soon as you start the second main quest, called a quest for tier, you'll be able to craft the Fortified and Vidar's armor pieces at Brock and Sindri's shop. While the larger strength boosts offered by the Vidar items is tempting, I think at this stage of the game, the smarter choice is the Fortified Husk Girdle and Fortified Husk Arm Guards, which increase both defense and strength. Defense is important to reduce the amount of damage you take from enemy attacks, and this is especially true on higher difficulties. For the same reason, I really like the Fortified Wrist and Waist Pieces bonus perk, which reduces damage taken from unblockable attacks and attacks from behind while blocking. In the early game, you're going to get into a lot of fights with groups of small enemies, and you're also probably still going to be getting used to the parry timing, so this perk will help keep you alive. By getting both the girdle and arm guards, we'll be able to max out this perk at 50% damage reduction, which is pretty significant. Remember, this perk only unlocks at level 3, so upgrade the Fortified Husk Girdle and arm guards as quickly as you can. We'll be sticking with them until upgrading to my mid-game build, which I'll cover in an upcoming video. Of course, very early on, you'll also obtain the Fortified and Vidar's chest pieces for free. We're going to move on to a different chest piece pretty fast, but for now, you might as well throw one of these on. The Fortified is more defense focused, while Vidar's favors offense, but honestly, at their lowest levels, you really aren't going to notice too much of a difference between the two. The perks aren't anything special either, although I do think the Fortified's perk will occur a little more often since it only requires you to block and parry, so I think the Fortified is the better choice by a small margin. If you like the look of Vidar's better though, feel free to go with that. Like I said, using the Fortified or Vidar's is really just a holdover until we can get to my preferred early game chest piece, Nidavellir's finest Plackart. This chest piece starts at level 2 and has solid stats for strength, defense, and vitality. The focus on defense and vitality in particular will be helpful in the early game, but what really makes this chest piece valuable is its perk for gaining health while stun grabbing enemies. Stun grabs are those animated attacks you can do by clicking R3, in other words your right stick, after an enemy falls over from having their stun bar fill up. You're totally invincible during this animation, and if you're wearing the Nidavellir chest piece, you'll gain back health over a few seconds. This is really useful in the early game when you don't have much health to begin with. You'll trigger stuns on enemies fairly often in combat anyway, and if you want to create more, you can use Kratos' fists and Atreus' sonic arrows to build up the enemy's stun meter faster. To get the Nidavellir chest piece, you need to start the side quest in service of Asgard, which is almost impossible to miss. Just make sure you talk with the dwarf in the Nidavellir tavern right after finishing the main quest dialogue with him. After that, you just need to shut down one of the mining rigs to get some Nidavellir ore, and then you'll be able to craft the chest piece at Brock and Sindri's shop. But as I mentioned before, I actually think you're better off sticking with and upgrading the Fortified wrist and waist pieces. The Nidavellir ones have a perk that makes it a bit easier to build up stun on enemies, so if you're having trouble with that, they can be helpful, but I feel the defensive benefits you get with the Fortified pieces are more useful, so I'd stick with them until you can upgrade to my recommended mid-game wrist and waist armor. By the way guys, if you find these detailed build breakdowns helpful, leaving a like on this video helps me know you'd like to see more, and it really does help out the channel, so it would be much appreciated. Okay, now that we have the armor pieces nailed down, let's move on to weapon grips. For the axe, I recommend keeping it simple and going with the Furious Maul, which you'll get very early in the main storyline. This is purely a strength-focused attachment, and also has a decent perk for a chance at getting a temporary strength boost anytime you get a kill with the axe. It will be a while before you get another grip worth switching to, so feel free to upgrade this one a few levels. The only other one to consider is the Fortified Frost Knob, which you get by clearing the Draugr hole in the Apple Core mine in Svartalfheim. This one is kind of interesting because it gives you a defense and stagger resistance bonus when using Frost Awaken, which you'll probably be using a lot anyway, but I found it doesn't really help that much. For the blades, you can upgrade to the deadly Obsidian handles for free by simply looting them from a legendary chest in the opening wetlands area of Svartalfheim. Svartalfheim. It is easy to miss though, so make sure you find this tunnel on the west bank that you can slip through in the boat after opening the first gate. These handles are a good holdover until you can get to the Jarnsmynda pit mine where you can get the Pommels of the Undying Spark. I really like these grips because they boost both strength and runic. They also have a perk that increases the amount of damage caused by the burn status, which is pretty nice. These grips are easy to miss too. Before heading into the underground portion of the mine, move the water sleuth over with your blade chain so it causes the giant crane to swing around. Grapple up onto the block and then freeze the water flow with your axe to make the crane swing back around to its original position. Grapple over to the ledge and then head up to the legendary chest containing the Undying Spark grips. While we're talking about the blades and axe, let's quickly cover which runic attacks to equip. And it will be quick because unfortunately we don't have many options in the early game. For the blades, the only option is Flames of Anguish, which you can't miss since they're dropped by a Drekki you have to fight. As for the axe, the first runic you'll come across is Winter's Bite, which is dropped by the Stalker. Again, you can't miss this one and you might as well equip it when you get it since you won't have anything else, but I would switch to Njord's Tempest as soon as you get it. This one is found in a legendary chest on Althoff's mining rig, which is the one on the west side of the Bay of Bounty in Svartalfheim. This rig has a fairly complex puzzle, so if you're having trouble with it, I'll link my walkthrough video down below where I have it marked with a timestamp. Unfortunately, we won't unlock any heavy runics until later on, so that pretty much covers runic attacks. You'll have two options for shields to choose between in the early game as well. Both shields can block attacks by holding L1, so don't be fooled by the Dauntless's description into thinking it can only parry. That being said, I think the Stonewall is the easier one for most players to use. All you need to do is hold L1 to block attacks like you normally would, and it will absorb some energy each time an enemy attacks. You can then release that energy by double tapping L1 to stagger enemies. The other major benefit of the Stonewall is the fact that it can block yellow ring attacks, whereas if you try that with the Dauntless, your guard will get broken. If you're going to use this shield, you'll want to wait until it's fully charged before double tapping L1. It won't do much when partially charged, but when fully charged, indicated by a glowing red, it will launch nearby enemies into the air so you can easily start juggling them for easy kills. This is a decent ability, but I'd recommend you get used to the parry playstyle enabled by the Dauntless shield. As I said earlier, you can still block normally with the Dauntless, but if you can learn the timing of enemy attacks, you'll be able to parry their attacks, which interrupts them and causes a significant stagger. The Dauntless will also charge up on a successful parry, and you can unleash the charge by double tapping L1 to bash enemies back. This is useful for creating openings to deal damage to all sorts of enemies, but it's particularly useful for small enemies which you can often launch off ledges, killing them instantly. Shields also have attachments in Ragnarok. You'll have the Rond of Volition by default, but you can upgrade to the Rond of Aggravation if you do the Weight of Chains side quest in Svartalfheim. To start this quest, you'll need to climb up to the watchtower next to Sindri's workbench, which you'll reach during the main storyline. Mimir will tell you to search for a key on an island, and I don't want to spoil anything, but it will be very clear what you need to do from that point on. Just make sure you loot the chest right after taking a zipline down to break the final chain and you'll get the Rond. Now this is actually a pretty solid early game shield attachment because it gives you a high chance of getting a rage burst on any successful parry. You should be trying to parry attacks often with that Dauntless shield anyway, so this has a nice synergy. Finally, we have Relics, and here we actually only have one option, the Talisman of Meign. You can't miss this one, because it's on the main storyline path you have to follow in the Apple Core underground mine. You'll get it after investigating a dead dwarf that was trapped in a crack you have to pass through. The Talisman of Meign grants a bonus to melee damage for a brief period. At level 1, this lasts for 10 seconds, but the duration and strength will increase with upgrades. I wouldn't recommend spending XP to upgrade this though. You'll want to save your XP for skills and other things like Spartan Rage upgrades. That being said, I think a lot of players forget about triggering the relics during combat, so remember you can hold L1 and your interact button to do this. For me, interact is X because I swap interact and evade to make them match other games, but if you're on the default settings then you'll need to hold L1 and press circle to trigger relics. Alright guys, that's my optimized early game build. Of course, this only covers gear from the earliest stages of the game, so if you're interested in builds for further stages, or if you found this video helpful, definitely leave a like to let me know that, and consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my God of War Ragnarok content. I'd love to know what you guys think the best early game gear is too, so totally leave me a comment down below. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.